Welcome to another episode of Narratives in Black, where we delve into the stories of Black leaders, creatives, and artists in the Boston area. Today, we have a truly inspiring guest, Catherine T. Morris.
Ooh.
Y'all are gonna see me fangirl out this entire interview. I promise you that. Catherine is the founder and executive director of the Boston Art and Music Soul Fest, a trailblazing event dedicated to breaking down racial and social barriers through the arts. She also serves as the director of arts and culture at the Boston Foundation, where she champions equity and inclusion in the arts. Catherine's journey from her roots in JP and Roxbury to becoming a visionary leader in Boston's cultural scene is nothing short of remarkable. Please join me in welcoming the visionary, the icon, that one, Catherine T. Morris.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, so you know who you are, though.
I'm still working on it.
Okay, and that's an honest answer. We love transparency around here. How you doing today, Queen?
I feel good. I feel good today.
Good. It's a little hot today, too.
It's the Sahara Desert, but we'll work on that.
The rain is coming to give us a clean slate, so we gonna be all right. We gonna be all right. I am so excited to sit here and have this conversation. I know you, but I don't know you. So when we're talking about all of your accomplishments and your impact, I also want to get some background on your personal life.
Okay.
Okay, because we've seen you do a lot of interviews. But we ain't talk about the nitty gritty.
I mean, no one wants to know the nitty gritty.
Oh, we always want to know.
Today.
Of course. I want to ask you to share some key experiences from your childhood in Jamaica Plain and Roxbury that shaped your love of the arts.
Ooh, okay. I grew up in a very creative home. Both my parents, my father, rest his soul, was.
Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, I mean he's always with me.
I know that's right.
My family's very interesting because how my father's side arrived to this country is what most people don't know. So my father's side is originally from St. Lucia and Montserrat, and so they arrived to Woburn, Mass. I literally just saw my family tree. We just had a family reunion. I'm like, wow, okay.
Woburn.
Yes.
Why there?
It was close enough to the city, but far enough as well. And then from there, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, they had their kids and they just kind of settled closer to Boston. So there's this beautiful Caribbean side of my life that I'm learning more of, which would explain a lot of stuff. And then my mother's side came from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, up to Boston, right? So you got these kind of southern roots, Caribbean roots. And for my parents to meet on a basketball court in Roxbury.
Okay, loving basketball. It's giving.
My mother playing hard to get, and my father, loved the cat and mouse game. But, their bond, their love, their commitment to family and those values. My father was raised in a family of carpenters, of tradesmen, entrepreneurs.
Wow.
And so that basis is what I was born into this earth with. And my mother's side cooks, worked in the hospitality industry, worked in the restaurant industry. So hard work is a non-negotiable. Caring, being in service is a non-negotiable. And so growing up in the house, music had always been a part of my childhood. I think I've literally grown up through every electronic device. For all those that know 8-tracks and 33s and laser discs,
Yes.
Absolutely know those devices. But what I loved was that my father inherited his father's wallpapering and painting company. And then he took that on at his company. He has taught all of us how to paint.
Wow.
Homes, mansions, fences, spindles, sides of all that. I know it all.
Spindles.
Yeah, hate those things. But we all learned that trade. A lot of the men in my family are in the trades. They're in the unions. They're carpenters. They're electricians. They're welders. So this evolution, this growth, this mindset of um, to never think you don't deserve. And looking at how other people live. I've seen a lot of different types of homes, a lot of different kinds of living, and always centering humanity in any time I would enter a space in my father. And watching him prepare his tools and talk to the walls, which was really weird as a kid, but space has life in it, right? And when you walk into a space, whether it's a new apartment or an old apartment or whatever, it has a previous story, right? That wants a new coat, if you will. And my father had this beautiful, I would say more of a spiritual way of like literally reading the room and making a set of recommendations to his clients about the color choices, right? And understanding their story and why the matching of those colors will change their behavior, right? And I'm like, what is going on? It was like some very out of this world stuff, but I paid attention to those things. And so I read people a lot, a whole lot. So there's that piece happening. And then my mom was the one always playing the music in the house. And for me, I always say I'm a 80s baby with 70s highlights. And the reason why is because funk was my basis for everything. And to hear from my mom about the stories of what Boston used to be with these songs, I hung on to those memories. They weren't mine, but I felt like, wow, it must have been dope in Boston at a certain time. So she'd make her own little cassette tapes.
I was gonna say cassette tapes after the 8-track. Yes.
We start with reel to reel, but we're not gonna go there. But she'd make these cassette tapes that legitimately told a story. Wow. And she would spend intimate time on these cassette tapes. And whether it was a breakup album, whether it was, Get Your Life Together, or like, Boo-hoo about like, it was just very reflective of humanity with her mixtapes. And so all of that together in a house, right? Laughter, comedy, traveling all the time, were the memories that I hung on to that were very essential to my development and how I wanted to move around as a human being, and knowing that I would have the support and love from them. And then the other thing I'll just say is, I'm from a family of 5. I'm the baby, the tallest. But my youngest brother of the oldest of the older siblings is and continues to be a barber. But how he got into that work was he was a doodler. He would draw constantly, and he would transfer those sketches into someone's head.
Wow.
And I was a little jealous because I'm like, I can't draw, can't whistle, can't sing, cannot do any of those things. But I was always in a creative, entrepreneurial environment. And those memories I've hung on to that have sustained me as to how I work, how I engage, how I support people, how I show up, and my very foundation of how I see the world and how I make decisions. You asked.
I did, and I'm so glad I did because I didn't know any of those things. And your dad going into spaces and reading rooms and breathing life into the walls, you were like, which is a strange thing, but it makes so much sense because you're right. Everything is breathable. Yes. Everything is living. It's carrying that. And it also talks about how you're able to come in and read the temperature real fast, okay? Quick.
Lots of practice.
Okay, but also your mom being a storyteller through these cassette tapes is beautiful. First of all, she could have done something with movies.
Okay, that's
sync licensing and all that stuff that people are getting paid for that.
Then. She didn't know that.
But she know now.
Yes, she does.
How did your early exposure to community centers and local cultural activities influence your career path?
So there's a couple of places in Boston that really, I think, are the staples or the springboards, if you will. That is the Shelbourne Community Center.
Do they still exist? When you name these things,
Yes.
do they still exist
Yes,
today?
yes. The Cooper Center on Washington Street in the Roxbury South End corridor. And then it's not called this now, but to us it was the Blue Hill Boys and Girls Club on Talbot Avenue. So those are the three anchors growing up that really influenced me creatively. One, at the Shelbourne Center, which was much earlier in my childhood, there was always someone around asking me what I was doing. Because I was bored. I would do my homework early and I'm like wandering around like trying to figure out, I need to be entertained. Enter dance.
Yes.
So I like choreographed routines. I think they're amazing, especially when you get a whole bunch of people together and it's tight. And at that time, dance videos were a huge thing. And so the Shelbourne offered a couple of those classes and I would just take them. And I fell in love with dance, which most people don't know. So
I did not know that. What kind of dance?
Contemporary, jazz. I love interpretive.
Interpretive.
There's all these other names for it, but I really like the free form. I feel like when you connect with a song, you'll know when your body needs to move in the right direction, right? But you really have to feel it. So the Shelbourne in that respect allowed me to just use dance as a tool of expression. On top of sports, definitely tried basketball, didn't work for me because I could care less for it. But the concept of teamwork is the element that I took from basketball. For the Cooper Center, for me, it was an opportunity just to be amongst my peers and be a kid in Boston, which at that time was not easy. But to have a space and be given permission to just be me, I had every opportunity to pursue at the Cooper Center. When I got to the Blue Hill Boys and Girls Club, I think that was a transition from a 12-year-old to a 13-year-old, the tween phases, where I think I entered my real first phase of a rites of passage because I entered that time where I made it to the teen room. And when you make it to the teen room, your whole life changes. And it did. But I came in at a time where we just had received a new teen director who I still talk to this day.
That's beautiful.
His name is Derek, and he came in and he was doing all these talent shows. And I'm like, yo, I want to learn that. Like, that looks dope. And when he was doing his talent shows, I went up to him very confidently. And I'm like, I need you to teach me how to do this thing, because this thing looks dope. And in that moment, he could have said no. But he saw the drive. And literally for my 13th year on this planet, he taught me everything about production, events, recruitment, audition, developing your flyer, negotiating space. I learned all that at 13.
Wow.
And by the end of my 13th year, produced my first talent show at the Boys and Girls Club.
Wow.
And it was a 4-hour talent show.
Oh, wow.
But I held auditions of my peers and literally curated the entire set. I sold 250 tickets. I baked cookies.
This is 13.
This is 13, okay? And I found some hosts. Like I literally auditioned all of my friends.
Okay.
And when I was done with it, when that talent show was successful, I turned to my mom. I had the biggest headache that day. It's the first time I was introduced to aspirin, whole nother story. But I was like, Ma, I want to do this. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I don't know what it's called. Like, it is my calling. She didn't know what to do with that, but she saw what my passion was. But had those three kind of epicenters had not existed, you and I would not be having this conversation.
Wow. You mentioned the beauty of having these centers because it allowed you to be free and be a kid and just exist. You said at that time in Boston, it was really hard to even do that. Can you elaborate a little bit for folks who don't know growing up in Boston? What do you mean by that?
I remember as a kid, gangs were very prevalent. Very prevalent. Like you couldn't wear certain colors. You couldn't be at certain bus stations. And you had to be in the house by a certain time. And I remember this one situation, it was like me and a couple of my friends literally on the corner of Harvard Street and Blue Hill Avenue. And mind you, it was my first interaction with cops. And they were so mean to us. Didn't put their hands on us at that time, but, scurried us away from being on the corner. Just, sipping on a big burst and having a bag of chips. And for whatever reason, our presence as young kids was creating a little bit of discomfort for the police officers. So we got off the corner. But what's interesting, because in my childhood home, negativity was not a thing we ever talked about. It was really about, this is your safe space. So the rest of the world outside of these doors, we never really got into. But there were a lot of life experiences in Boston that have humbled me about relationships and how to talk to people and how to meet folks where they're at. And that you literally, for the most part, I think it's a little bit more crazy now, but you literally can dismantle tough situations if you pay attention to body language, if you pay attention and assess all the things around you. But also, we had, for us, the gangs were probably the biggest issue. There was an abundance of jobs that I think also saved my life at that time. But drugs were huge. We had the red light district in Boston, which is not that anymore. There was a lot of pimps and hoes around me. Yeah, there was a lot of that going on, but still found innocence in being a kid in Boston. But it was rough. It was very rough at that time.
So we didn't even discuss about the desegregation and the busing in Boston and what that was like. And you went to METCO.
Yeah.
Can you explain some of that experience for those who have not grown up here, who don't know about it?
Yeah. So the METCO program at that time came out of the need of that there was a lack of opportunity and access to education, particularly for Black and Hispanic kids in Boston at that time. It's changed differently now. And so G. McGuire and many other parents fought for the opportunity to send inner city kids to the suburbs to further their education, which happened. And at that time, I got into the METCO program because of my brother. My brother went to Wayland. And because I was his sibling at that time, it was like a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into the METCO system. But I was in BPS up until 2nd grade. I was actually at the Winthrop School, and then prior to that, I was at Curtis Hall.
Wow.
so
Wow.
there's both dualities of that. But I entered the METCO program in the 2nd grade. So I repeated the 2nd grade, whole other story. And succeeded all the way to 12th grade. And so I was put into the Lincoln and Sudbury school systems. Yep. So for a grueling 10, 11 years, a child had to make an executive decision to get up every day, 5 days a week, for the next 10 years or so, 5 o'clock in the morning, to be on a bus by 6, to be on that bus for an hour or so, to be at a school in a distant foreign land,
Yeah.
and then be expected to perform.
Excel.
Sure. Uh, and when school ends, making the determination if now you're going to do after school activities, which means now you're not getting home till 7, and then rinse and repeat, right? And for me, I think being in the Lincoln school system, I remember my first day like it was yesterday. It was my first encounter with racism.
In second grade.
In second grade. I'll never forget it. I tell this story all the time. I literally, in the Lincoln school system, literally all the black kids and Hispanic kids were dropped off at the beginning of a large cul-de-sac. And that cul-de-sac consisted of elementary, kindergarten, and then middle school. So I'm at the first set of buildings for second grade. And I remember getting off this bus, and this Hispanic kid named Chaz, I'll never forget him because he had a mohawk and missing teeth. He had a chip on his shoulder, and I don't know why it was me. It could have been anybody else, but he gets off the bus, mad and upset. And I happen to be behind this kid, and he turns around and spits on me and calls me a nigger first day. The next thing that happens, what changes my life, is the person who came to my rescue and called that kid out and kicked his ass
Good.
was a white girl. My best friend, Jessica, love her to pieces. She ended up becoming, her family ended up becoming my host family because of that.
Wow.
And she had been by my side every single day.
Wow.
So, wait, it gets better. So.
Because I'm like, wait, he's Hispanic?
Yeah.
Calling you? Okay.
Yeah. So, but what was interesting was subliminally, I was experiencing racism and bigotry my entire second year because I had a teacher, Miss Rosen. I was taller than her. I was the tallest second grade kid. So I'm walking into that plus size kid, you know, people don't know what to do with me. And she made me clean cubbies my entire year. I didn't learn anything.
Are you serious?
Nope, very. Yep. And my white friend, who I love to this day, was by my side.
How did she manage to get away with that for so long?
I called my mama, and then all of a sudden things changed.
Of course, because, you know, mama don't play.
Yeah. But those that experience set off the rest of my METCO experience, right? So I ended up having a chip on my shoulder because I'm like, I'm just trying to be out here to learn.
Yeah.
You know, here's an opportunity. But those first 2 encounters with the springboard, I'm like, if this is what my METCO experience is going to be, then I need to arm myself a little differently. And so I was very aware of that starting in second grade. Now, by the time I made it to the other set of buildings, things got a little better. I had more support. I was put into special education, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, because the perception was I was perceived as being an angry kid. The interesting thing about that, though, was there were the teachers, the educators in that special education program knew I was not supposed to be there. But I stayed because it was a safe zone for me. And that safe zone allowed me to not be affected by all the stuff, right? I didn't have to walk in with a chip on my shoulder because I'm black, I'm tall, and I'm thickly settled.
I love that term, thickly settled.
So what's interesting is, though, that 8th grade, so when I was going through 6th, 7th, 8th grade middle school, 8th grade year was such a transitional, transformative experience because my teacher at that time, Miss Terry Nathanson, rest her heart, saw my potential in talent shows. And at that time, we had these electives that everyone was taking. I'm like, y'all ain't got no dance up in here. So I made the case with her support to the principal, and for the first time in school history, a 8th grader would teach a hip hop dance elective, grade her peers, and perform in that talent show to 200 students.
Wow.
And then the rest of it got easier when I got to high school. But like those formative years, talk about having patience and dealing with hatred, and you didn't even open your mouth yet.
You didn't do anything. You were just walking behind them.
You know? So that has had a tremendous effect on how I engage with people, even still to this day.
Talk about adversity, advocacy for yourself. You're like 7 in the 2nd grade.
Yeah.
When you're in the 8th, that's your teenage years. You're really coming into terms with who you are. When you were at the Blue Hill, do you think when you saw that there was no electives, did that have something to do with your advocacy for bringing those in?
Absolutely, because I saw the power of the arts at that time early on. And there was a beautiful curiosity from the white suburban kids about Black culture.
I was gonna say.
And I'm like, I'm gonna seize the day, to seize this moment. I think what was the icing on the cake was that the principal saw that value, wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for creative expression in a school that was working very hard to eliminate us. And I thank the principal at that time for that opportunity, and the teachers around me who were just like, whatever you want to do, you can do it. And that's what I did.
And that wasn't your whole experience, because you went to an HBCU.
I did. When I graduated from Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School. Oh, I gotta tell you about that. I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
So when I get to high school, mind you, I'm the class of 1999. Whole nother story.
Showing age over here.
Everyone remembers that year. So high school, 9th through 12th grade, I was still picked on, but I wasn't picked on by white people. I was picked on by Black boys. And part of it was because I was taller than the most prominent football player, most prominent basketball player. And I did the ultimate thing that I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to do, which was the etiquette on the school bus. That seniors sit in the back and freshmen sit in the front. And I'm like, I am 6 foot something. I can't fit in these seats. So the most logical seat is the single one in the back. And I remember when I sat in that seat, there was a gentleman who shall remain nameless, because it came back around when we became adults. He picked on me. He called me the B word. He spat on me. And I remember I went home and I told my dad at that time, and he was like, what? Where's this bus stop? And I was like, no. He's like, nope, you're not, no.
It's too late now. You already said it.
No. And what ended up happening was I told him where the bus stop was. My dad, my 3 uncles, my 3 brothers, their children showed up at the bus stop and asked him, so where's this kid? And he was walking up the street, and they all crowded around him. It was like, basically, if you ever call my daughter the B word, I'm going to have your ass. And that gentleman didn't bother me per se for the rest of my time in high school, but got other people.
I was going to say, yep, that's typical bully behavior.
I'll never forget, it was dead of winter. It had to be 2 degrees. And those seniors, that gentleman made those seniors put down all the windows on the METCO bus. So that 45-minute drive was an icebox because of that day of being bullied. So, and what ended up happening that was transformative was I got tired of this racist narrative about the 98 Black kids in my class. And so what I ended up doing was I created a student-led social justice movement called Universal Rhythm. And it was meant to use arts to translate the experiences that METCO kids were going through at Lincoln Sudbury. And what was so interesting about Universal Rhythm was, you had to apply for it. You had to have a certain GPA. If you fell below that GPA, I had the relationships with all the teachers that you could get after-school mentoring and help if you fell below this GPA.
Wow.
But I essentially ran it like a for-profit. And the biggest thing that I remember that was significant to the school's history was our talent shows.
Of course.
The talent shows, what was significant was those talent shows took over a class block, which no one in school history would ever do. So we were the last period on Wednesday, which is the shortest day of the week. But our talent shows went for 2 hours.
Wow.
And those talent shows allowed all these creative METCO kids that are still my friends now to exercise their creative pursuits and be able to play out in real time what they go through as a METCO kid. And those talent shows became so popular, they became a part of the school calendar.
Wow.
For 3 years.
Wow.
So coming out of that, Drumline had just come out, and I was like, I want to go to HBCU. Sign me up. I want that experience. And so I went on 2 tours of an HBCU tour. Shout out to Chip Greenwich.
Oh, hey, he's still in Boston.
Yeah, that's the homie.
Just saw him yesterday at Grace by Nia.
I was so inspired by Drumline. I mean, Nick Cannon for all purposes, but like Drumline just, outside of Drumline and School Days, like those 2 films, I'm like, I want that experience because I'm not getting that here. I literally have lost my culture and my identity for almost 12 years.
Yeah.
And so I went on 2 rounds of this HBCU tour, 16 schools, 2 weeks, do the math, on a bus.
16 schools in 2 weeks.
And it was worth every moment. I saw a different side of the South that I heard about through my family, but it was different to go. To see actual cotton fields, I'm like, oh, okay, this is
different
real.
Experience. What were your top 3?
Howard was in my top.
Howard's in everybody's top.
Spelman, Hampton, but when I went on the second tour, it was confirmed for me what my number 1 school was, which I ended up getting, which is Winston-Salem State University. There was something magical about that place that I could not express in words, but I knew that I was going to get what I needed. And when I got accepted with 90% financial aid, mind you. I got there. My family was nervous because, that's like 13 hours of a drive from Boston to North Carolina.
Could be 16, depending on traffic.
But Bostonians have a lead foot. And the first year, my freshman year, was a beautiful year because it was the first time that a freshman had to have housing in an upperclassman co-ed dorm.
Okay. Look, all them years at METCO paid off, ma'am, okay? Give it to me.
And the reason why is because the beds weren't long enough in the freshman dormitory.
See?
So my first year, I am in a ultimate culture shock. Because I'm like, sororities and fraternities, I heard that, but I've never seen this. They've had coronation and the honoring of a king and queen, and I'm like, we don't have that. Okay, they got a drum line. Oh, I've just never had those experiences. So in a 1.5 years time, I felt more Black and ready and prepared to take on the world because I got to see what what is possible when we are just given what we need and people move out the way.
I can't believe that was your childhood experience and then going into college like that. This makes so much sense of who you are, though, but also speaks to a lot of what you've had to face throughout your entire life. And I'm sure it got a lot harder when you decided to make BAMS Fest. I'm pretty sure about that, which is my next question, because I'm like, ma'am, what inspired you to create BAMS Fest? I mean, we're hearing pieces of that, but why Boston?
Right.
And how did your experiences in Philadelphia contribute to this?
So I stayed at Winston-Salem State for a year and a half. And that's because I felt like I got what I needed. I didn't need the academics because my METCO experience made me too advanced. So there were moments at my HBCU. I had 2 white professors, which was like a whole nother story. And I remember in my English class.
What were they teaching? What was the subject?
Well,
because I really just want to know.
One was English, the other one was history, and I'm like, this ain't gonna work. But I remember my English professor failing me, failed every single essay because she didn't like Yankees. Inside historical Black college, I was like, wow. Okay.
Interesting.
So it's funny because I would take my papers and I'd go to another English professor, and they're like, "There's nothing wrong with your papers." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
I know this.
This feels a little familiar. All right, cool. So I decided, all right, I'm like, I gotta be closer to home, but I don't want to be too close to home. I started off as a mass communications major. I wanted to do radio. Radio's where my heart is at that time because high school had a radio station. Oh, I forgot to say.
You didn't say none of that.
Sorry. Let me backtrack.
Rewind.
In high school, there was a radio station, WIAJ, 97.7 FM, 60 watts.
Ooh, okay.
And it was originally a rock radio music station. But for METCO kids, that was not working. And 106 on Park was like just booming.
Love.
I was like, all right, we gotta do something. I gotta do something because arts and culture and music is a part of my fabric. So I went up to the teacher who was running it, Paul Serapis, and I'm like, listen, I'm going to be the director of student programming for your radio station, and this is how I'm gonna do it. We need an open format. He's like, all right, well, figure out how you're gonna get the music. I said, all right, cool. I wrote my first sponsorship letter in high school. I got 2 Technique turntables. I got all our stuff sponsored. Thank you, Roche Brothers.
Not Roche Brothers?
Roche Brothers, yes, they did.
Wow.
Yeah, we were able to get these.
You know how expensive that is?
Yeah,
it's expensive.
It's very expensive.
Y'all don't know that because y'all young.
I utilized my family's skill set in carpentry. We literally demolished and rebuilt that radio station from scratch.
Wow.
And at that time, the way I got music was I wrote to every single record label at that time when you could do that. Yeah. And I acquired all the records, all the whack, like everything you can think of. All the latest music, I funneled that pipeline to our high school.
Wow.
And then I created a schedule. So I took the graveyard shift. This is why my mother doesn't like me to this day. I took the graveyard shift. So I did the 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. And I would come back to school the next day.
I was just about to say it because I'm like, you've already been busy.
Mind you, there's no one in the school except the janitor who I had a great relationship with.
The janitors are always cool.
Right, who had my back.
Yeah.
And so he would, buy me food. My mother would come out and stay with me. But I literally taught myself how to do radio in high school.
This is before the clock, y'all. This is before the clock. So you didn't have nobody teaching you any of this stuff.
I was just interested.
Wow.
And when I tell you about access to labels, so at that time there was Arista, Jive, J Record. There was like a lot of the indie stuff that was going. And
wow, Arista's not even.
I know it's not. But this is like when Annie Up by MOP was coming out. This is like the timing of these records was crazy. Maroon 5 had just come out, and I did my first interview with them for a little high school radio station. Right?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
So all this outreach that you did was just paying off tenfold, just writing sponsorships, getting all this stuff donated.
Telling my story.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
Right? So I knew that mass communications, I already had it in high school. So I'm like, great, I'm going to HBCU. This could be amazing. And I get there and I get into college radio format, which is totally different.
Yes.
And I learned from this amazing gentleman, Mr. Franklin, who taught me about enunciation on the radio. And he hated my accent. He's like, oh, you're so from Massachusetts. Y'all talk like this. And I'm like, dear black man, I'm going to need for you to leave me alone. But he was on my behind because he saw my potential. So I left Winston-Salem State at the point that I needed to, and I transferred to Temple University in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And then I changed my major to tourism and hospitality management. Never worked a day in hotels, but they had an event management track. And I was like, and I'm gonna learn everything that I can about events. And at that time, the Roots Picnic had just started. Jill Scott was just in her prime. Music Soul Child was just coming out. So I was at this moment of like all the goodness that I would never get in my hometown was happening. And I was not required, what was required of Temple students at that time was you had to graduate with 1 internship. I did 7 because I'm nosy as hell. I'm curious.
I would just say ambitious, but nosy works too.
I'll keep it simple.
Yeah.
And so when I'm in Philadelphia, mind you, I transferred, so I never lived on campus. They put all transfer students in the heart of the city. So I was immersed in everything.
In Philly?
In Philly.
Oof.
Yes, I was. I loved it. Have my own apartment. Oh, the freedom. So I threw myself in everything that I could, and there were two internships. One was an internship that turned into a job, but both experiences cemented the idea for Bands Festival, and that was I worked for an organization called the Rhythm and Blues Foundation, and that organization existed to support artists 60 years and older with medical, healthcare, and mental support.
Wow.
And I thought that was fascinating. Unbeknownst to me, what blew my mind was the people I was going to meet. Patti LaBelle, the entire Levert family. The one that's the real kicker is Teddy Pendergrass before he passed away.
What?
Yes, through this foundation. And
these are legends.
Right. And these are folks where my mother made her mixtapes off.
Absolutely,
like,
telling
okay,
stories with Patti LaBelle love songs.
Yes.
Wow.
I met Usher. I've met a Music Soul Child. Like, all these people, I'm like, wow, this is happening in Philly. And for me, it made it reachable that these folks are human. They go through a lot of different things, and I can have a conversation. And in that internship, I learned the role of fundraising and development, because they're raising money to ensure that these basic needs are met.
Absolutely.
And along the way, meeting the people, these legends, the Kenny Gambles and Leon Huffs of our time, the Philadelphia Sound, right?
Wow.
I had access to these people through this foundation that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere.
And you had no idea you're going to meet any of these people.
No. And what's interesting is that the building we worked in was not too far from City Hall. So I spent a lot of time in City Hall. And there was a festival that was happening. And I was like, what is this? And my internship ended. My internship supervisor, Deborah, said, you should go apply for this internship. And I did. I got the internship instantly, spent 6 months on it. And the festival basically is Philadelphia's birthday festival. It's 7 days. At that time, it was 7 days.
Oh, wow.
Citywide programming, 1 million people.
Excuse me. For 7 days?
7 days.
What did that experience feel like when you were immersed in it?
I was beautifully stressed because I was thrown in almost every neighborhood of Philly.
Wow. Oh.
And I had to do the programming and operations. I sat on that team. I
Oh, wow.
specifically wanted to sit on that team because I wanted to understand how programming can affect community. And because of that, I got to be really involved in the hiring of the talent, engaging with children and families, promoting education and reading, and just watching the different aspects of the arts show up. Like the availability of the arts in Philly is what blew my mind of, wonder if I can do this at home, right?
At this point, how long were you in Philly at this point? Because now you're learning all these neighborhoods that you might not even had time to even learn.
I was probably 2.5 years in.
Wow. And how many communities was this, ma'am?
It was a lot. It was a lot.
Wow. So you're getting all sides.
I'm getting all sides of that. And that year, I talk about access and just being at the right place at the right time. So that festival had a firework concert finale, and that year their headliners were John Legend, Patti LaBelle, and Hall & Oates. And I was like, and I'm done. And I got to meet all three of them.
What?
And what's fascinating though is that aside from meeting them, it was the women that I worked under in this festival that I'm like, I can actually do this because they're doing it. And what was amazing was one of the women who's no longer here, this longtime mentor of mine, Valerie Lagaskis, she just happened to be, so she was overseeing all the sponsorship for the festival. When I looked at her resume, it said former director of the Macy's Day Parade. And I was like, okay, lovely lady, just strict to the point, the way she talked about stuff, the way she could get money. I'm like, okay, wow. I get to work under her tutelage. Right? And so once that experience, when that experience happened, I was so inspired about how do I do this kind of work back home. So I went through several other internships. I worked for an entertainment company, and I'll share this now because the job's not there anymore. But I did an internship with the company that was producing 2 film festivals. And one of those film festivals was the Philadelphia International Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. And at that time, I came in as an intern, but then because my supervisor was not doing a good job, they fired him immediately and gave me his job.
Wow.
And at that time, I had 3 months to produce 25 events on a $20,000 budget.
Wait. Slow it down for the people who did not hear that. I'm sorry, excuse me. How many events and how long?
25
with how much?
events. Oh, I had to produce 25 events for a week-long festival, and I only had $20,000.
Okay.
I saved them 3 cents. A lot of begging. But
Wow.
I got to meet John Leguizamo, Shishi LaRue. I got to plan a porn party.
Okay.
I got to just have all these amazing experiences that I know I would have never had in my beautiful city of Boston.
I was like, first of all, 25 on 20K.
It can happen. It can happen. And the thing is, because
I'm stressed just trying to think about how it does happen.
part of it is I used the story, which was true. You know, I'm a college student.
You are.
I really want to prove that I can do this work. Can you help me, please, 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 please?
And who could say no?
You know, but it was really great to like really work on a budget and learn all the different ways in which you can ask for resources. And I just honed those skills being in Philly. And so by the time we got to graduation, first recession hits, no jobs. And I come back home, I'm like, I came off of this beautiful experience, but I'm not quite sure about my hometown because things were changing. So I sat very quietly and did several different odd jobs and eventually landed at MIT for almost 10 years and really honed in on the skill of, or honed in on the idea of like, I want to start this organization and there's going to be a festival component to it. But I want to make sure that I'm elevating all of my creative friends because I'm tired of them leaving. But I didn't quite know what that needed to look like. I just know what my past experiences were and how do I give it a hometown feel. That doesn't feel like Philly or New York. It feels like Boston, but it's got soul.
That
So I knew
part.
that. But everything else had to be filled in by different jobs and then talking to a lot of different artists and just asking questions of elders, talking to people who had done this work before me to get their blessing, to understand the challenges, and then decide if I'm really going to do this work, which I then ended up doing.